This is Money, Motivation, and Mike, and I am your host, Michael Wainwright. In charge of the mothership is audio engineer Jason Wright. And hello to you, world. This is the show that will change your life. You can contact us at info@mx3.vip and find all of our content at mx3.vip or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content, which comes out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. Jason, big day, big opportunities here to discuss some more history. As you know, I come on the show here. I talk about what we're going to be talking about in the future, and then something else hits me that I have to switch gears. You know, we've been trying to get back to those 1990 Cowboys for a month and a half, but who knew that the Texas Rangers, by the way, the Texas Rangers are still the world champions of 2023 Major League Baseball World Series.
Can't take it away from them.
They did not take it away over the last week. Nope. The week plus. So we're still the world champions of the world of baseball. And my good friend and longtime listener of the show, Dax Powell, contacted me and reminded me of when I was talking about on the previous episode of all the free agents that the Ray Davis ownership group has come in and signed to help the Rangers now go to 3 World Series in 13 years. He reminded me that I forgot the biggest one of the bunch. And that's right. Mr. Cliff Lee. I did not mention Cliff Lee on the 2010 team, who basically on that left-handed arm, along with, there was C.J. Wilson. Those were the two guys that we rode to the World Series that year. But Cliff Lee coming on in mid-season, there is no doubt we wouldn't even have won the division, let alone made it to the World Series without Cliff Lee. So my apologies to the Lee family. And it does show once again that people are paying attention to from our listening audience. And you know, Mr. Dax Powell, he wants to come on and do a show and talk some baseball because those 2010, 2011 years, he was the batting practice pitcher for when left-handers threw to the team. See, they bring in guys who will condition and have quality arms to throw batting practice before each game. So you're going to see a left-hander, they bring in a left-hander. You're going to see a right-hander, they bring in a right-hander. Dax Powell was on the payroll there with those Rangers. He has rings. He has American League Championship rings. Obviously didn't win a World Series in 10 and 11, but he has American League pennant rings that I'm sure he'll bring on the show and let us see. He also played on the last ever Southwest Conference champions, Texas Longhorns. You know, that's kind of a name we don't use on this show, but we do give it, we do throw it out that he put on the last ever Southwest Conference champions of 1996 before Texas joined the Big 8, which then turned into the Big 12. But Dax, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And as we always like to talk about the listening audience and the viewing audience, and we have been more focused here of late on the viewing audience because it is skyrocketing. 77% in the last 28 days, Jason, to our subscribers on YouTube. And I know here in these early stages, but you got to remember, we've been on YouTube now almost a year. We're coming up on, we're six weeks away, 6 episodes away from being on the YouTube channel for that long. And we're growing by leaps and bounds. And I'm very, very honored and very intrigued to see where we're going to be going in the year 2024 as we come along. Yeah. And I'm going to get back to the Cowboys and we're going to cover that. But Jason, on November the 22nd, 1963, one of the biggest events in the history of this country, if not one of the biggest events in the history of the world, happened. And that is the assassination of the 35th president of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. We are coming up on the 60th anniversary. Now, one little side note, my youngest grandson was born on November the 22nd. He will be 2 years old here coming up on November the 22nd. But I had to go and touch on this. I've done a lot of history on the Kennedy family. I've done a lot of history on President Kennedy, and obviously it's a big event. It was a sore spot for the city of Dallas for a long time, which, by the way, a lot of people give the credit for that sore spot going away to the emergence of the Dallas Cowboys, which we talk a lot about on this show, that it was always the town that killed the president before it became the town of the world champion, Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys. But going to read through some things here and talk about some stuff. And then today and today only, Jason, on Money, Motivation, and Mike, I'm going to give you my theory of what happened. Because, as I say, 60 years ago, we're coming up on the assassination. You know what that really means, Jason?
Please tell me.
60 years of government cover-up on who actually killed the 35th president of the United States. That's what I think.
Can't wait to hear.
And I have my backup on why I believe that, and impossible for one man to have been involved in the assassination of the 35th president of the United States. But on November the 22nd, 1963, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States, was assassinated while riding in a presidential motorcade through Daley Plaza. If you've ever been to Daley Plaza, when you pull in there, there's a lot of great architecture. That school book depository, all those things, the picket fence. Now, I don't know if the picket fence is still there. It was there for a long time. The grassy knoll, etc. If you've ever ridden through there, that's the first thing you think of is JFK. But during this time, Kennedy was in the vehicle with his wife, Jackie O, as we call her, Jacqueline Kennedy, Texas Governor John Connally, who was a conservative. Now, remember, he's a conservative. Kennedy was a Democrat. And they were there. One of the main reasons for this visit was to smooth over the friction between the Democrats and the Republicans in the state of Texas. And while he was here, President Kennedy, he was going to start working on his 1964 campaign. So he was coming for several reasons, but that was the main gist, is to come and try to calm down some things that were going on between the Democrats and the Republicans. John Connally and John Connally's wife, Nellie, when he was fatally shot near the school book depository by former U.S. Marine Lee Harvey Oswald. The motorcade rushed to Parkland Hospital, Memorial Hospital, where Kennedy was pronounced dead about 30 minutes after the shooting. Connally was also wounded in the attack, but recovered. President Lyndon Baines Johnson assumed the presidency upon Kennedy's death, as we have all seen the pictures of LBJ in Air Force One out at Love Field. Remember, Jason, at that time, there was no DFW airport. Love Field. On Air Force One at Love Field, LBJ would not leave Washington, even though the Secret Service was encouraging him due for his own safety. Now, he would not leave Dallas to head to Washington without Jackie O. Jackie O would not leave Dallas without the body of her husband, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So as we all know, that took some time for that to all go down. But we've all seen the pictures of Lady Bird Johnson, Jackie O, standing beside the president as he is sworn in as the 36th president of the United States of America on the runway of Love Field, right down probably 6-8 miles from where President Kennedy was shot and killed. Now, we have all seen, there's two things that I remember about seeing all these videos from the president. Yes, the three of them standing there in Air Force One. The other thing that I always remember is legendary CVS reporter Walter Cronkite sitting at his desk, his news desk, as he reports to the world that the 35th president of the United States is now dead. I think we all remember that, as he takes off those black rimmed glasses and puts them on his desk while he delivers the news. And I believe he called it the most difficult thing that he ever did on a newscast. Now, as this unravels over time, the Warren Commission, now I want you to think about this, the Warren Commission puts out a report 10 months after the assassination, 10 months later, claiming that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone with his 91 millimeter rifle. And don't forget, he also killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, with a 38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. Now, we can confirm that because there are eyewitnesses to that particular situation. But Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone with his 38 millimeter, 91 millimeter 38 rifle is probably not something that actually happened. Now, I want you to go back and I want you to think about this, and this is where we're going to start with the grassy knoll conspiracy theory. There were things in the Kennedy administration that was very important to him. First, right off the bat, the Fidel Castro Bay of Pigs, the Cuban missiles, where we had the missiles sitting down on the beaches in Florida, and how we were going to overthrow Fidel Castro. That was a big deal. Going to the moon by the end of the decade was a big deal to the JFK administration. Civil rights was coming on, which was supposedly JFK's biggest need for putting his own brother, Robert F. Kennedy, into the Attorney General's office. Now, civil rights, obviously, big thing. But the biggest item on now, during that three-year administration, was to go down and start trying to take down organized crime. Now, why do I leave that for last, and why do I even mention it? Because I believe that organized crime had a lot to do with the assassination of the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Now, why do I think that? Now, we go back to when Kennedy was the senator from Massachusetts, and he was getting ready to run there in the late 50s. We will start with the fact of who was Kennedy's brother-in-law, Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford was a member of the Rat Pack run by Frank Sinatra, also Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Sinatra. I'm sorry. Let me start over. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, all a part of the Rat Pack. So why would they have involvement in this particular assassination? Peter Lawford being a member, obviously he was brought in by Dean Martin. I don't think I mentioned Dino's name a while ago, but Dean Martin. And what did Frank Sinatra do in the 50s to cut his teeth? He performed in nightclubs of clubs being owned by mafia members. Most importantly, the Chicago mob. Now, Al Capone's already gone at this time, but that Chicago mob is still big, one of the biggest syndicates in the country, behind the five families from the New York City. So here we go. Lawford, brother-in-law to JFK. Lawford, good friends with Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, good friends with mafia members because he works, in essence, as the entertainer of the mafia scene in their nightclubs. So, Daddy Joe Kennedy pressures Lawford to put pressure on Sinatra, to put pressure on his mafia buddies, because you got to remember, the mafia back in those days, I'm not going to say they ran the unions, but they had a whole lot to do with them. That's why the Teamsters and Jimmy Hoffa and those guys are all investing Teamster retirements in the casinos in Las Vegas, because they're running that, gambling, alcohol, drugs, prostitution, racketeering, money laundering. I mean, that is the mafia. So if you can strong arm the mafia to persuade, if the mafia can go into a neighborhood and they can persuade this person over here to give me 10% of their sales every Friday because they are scared, they dadgum sure will go to a voting booth and vote for someone that you are insisting that I vote for. Because if that guy don't get elected, it don't matter if I voted for him or not, I'm going to get killed, because that's how things went down back in those days. So I believe that the mafia's involvement in getting the state of Michigan, the northern states in general, where maybe Kennedy was not very strong, they were swing states, but those were big time union states. union controlled by the mafia. Sinatra helps Kennedy get elected by pressing on his buddies in the organized crime scene known as the mafia. So now all this happens. Kennedy gets elected, puts his brother, Bobby Kennedy, Robert RFK, into the attorney general's position. And we don't go to the moon that year. Matter of fact, we don't get to the moon till 69. We do go down and put some missiles on the beaches and start up with the Fidel Castro. Civil rights getting going. But RFK goes to work on organized crime right off the bat. So what is he now doing? Going after people, going after groups that helped his brother get that position as president of the United States. I believe that the mafia had a big thing to do with the assassination of the 35th president of the United States in downtown Dallas, Texas, back on November the 22nd, 1963. I have no doubt in my mind. Now, let's go back here and you think about some of these things. As secure as it is today, think about when this all goes down and you see those pictures, and think about how things have changed during that time. You look at the clothing that the people have on during all those videos. Well dressed. You don't see any logos. There are no Nike swoops. Matter of fact, most of the men have on suits and ties. Most of the women have on dresses. Okay? Did you notice in those videos, if you go back, how everybody looked thin? There wasn't a whole lot of obesity going on in the 1960s.
No, there wasn't.
There also was a whole lot of smokers. Whole lot of smokers. You go back and you watch 60s TV. There's a lot of smoking going on. I had to go back. I couldn't believe that Johnny Carson used to smoke cigarettes on the set. Had a little ashtray right here to his right.
I did not recognize that.
Yes, and you can see the smoke coming up out of that little area beside his desk. But going all the way back, and we're going to go through Daly Plaza here for a minute. So you think about on November the 22nd, when Air Force One arrived at Dallas Love Field at 11:40 in the morning with President Kennedy and the First Lady. They boarded a 1961 Lincoln Continental convertible limousine to travel to a luncheon at the Dallas Market Center. That's where they were going. All right. It had been, there had not been a president ride in an open-aired vehicle since they were riding in stagecoaches many, many, many years before that. So other occupants of the vehicle, obviously, as we've already talked about, but a couple, Secret Service agent Bill Greer, Special Agent Roy Kellerman, who rode in the front passenger seat, and obviously Governor John Conley, the wife, they set forward, and 4 Dallas police officer motorcycles accompanied the Kennedy limousine. Vice President Johnson, Lady Bird Johnson, and Senator Yarborough rode in another convertible right behind the president. The motorcade was going a 10-mile route. 10 miles, designed to give Kennedy maximum exposure to the crowds by passing through a suburban section of Dallas, down Main Street, into downtown Dallas, before turning right onto Houston Street. After another block, the motorcade was to turn left onto Elm, pass through Daly Plaza, and travel a short segment down Stemmons Freeway to what's now called the Trade Center, which back then was called the Trade Market. And the planned route had been reported in newspapers several days in advance. Several days. So you're going to do something like this, you've got plenty of time. You know, they of course, they don't have open and do that anymore, but open end on to the air in your vehicle. But despite concerns of hostile protesters, Kennedy chose to leave the open against the Secret Service, FBI, etc., so that he could greet the warm, enthusiastic crowd that morning, November the 22nd, 1963. Things to be thinking about there. Now, as we have also talked about, the Warren Commission, there's a Rockefeller Commission, there's a church committee commission. They all agreed to the findings of the single bullet theory. The magic bullet theory, as a lot of us refer to it, because we don't particularly see how that could happen. Now, after the aftermath there in the Daily Plaza, as the motorcade left Daily Plaza, some witnesses sought cover. The others joined police officers to run up the grassy knoll to search for the shooter. Now, you think about that. Why are people running up the grass to the picket fence if they heard the gunshot from behind them? All right?
Right.
I know where a gunshot comes from. You can hear it over here now. And there are certain areas where it echoes around in the woods or in the mountains, etc. But you've got these people running up the grassy knoll to look over the picket fence. But supposedly nobody was there to participate in the shooting of our president. Okay, among 178 witnesses who testified at the Warren Commission, 78, Jason, were unsure of the shot's origin. 49 believed they came from the depository. 21 thought they came from the grassy knoll. And 78, as I said, were unaware of where they thought. Now, no witness was ever reported as seeing anyone with or without a gun immediately behind the knoll picket fence at the time of the shooting. But that is a whole lot of contradiction. 49 out of 178. What is that? A little over, closer to 30%, somewhere in there, that believe that the bullet came from the depository. All right, well, that leaves 65 to 70% that believe it didn't or are unsure.
Right.
But in a 10-month investigation, it was come up that we have a single shooter. I'm telling you, that's not the case. At 12:38 p.m., Kennedy arrived at the emergency room of Parkland Memorial Hospital. Get this, I did not know this until I started doing my research. Although Kennedy was still breathing after the shooting, still breathing, his personal physician, George Berkeley, immediately saw that survival was impossible. After Parkland surgeons performed, now they call it, it's called cardiac massage back then. Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1 p.m., 30 minutes after the shooting. And then, of course, it goes to CBS and the Walter Cronkite that we've already talked about. Secret Service was concerned about the possibility of a larger plot and urged Johnson to leave Dallas, like I've already said, and return to the White House. And then that's where all of the scuttlebutt come from, waiting on Mrs. Kennedy, and then Mrs. Kennedy waiting on President Kennedy, her husband. And they did, and you know, also right off the bat, LBJ's already thinking about bad publicity of leaving them in Dallas while he returns to Washington, D.C. At this time, now this is important because I've got some good things here about this autopsy. At the time of Kennedy's assassination, the murder of a president was not under federal jurisdiction. So the feds did not have jurisdiction in Dallas, Texas. State County Medical Examiner Earl Rose insisted that Texas law be put into play and require him to perform an autopsy in Dallas, Texas, before that body ever left. A heated exchange between the Kennedy's aides and Dallas officials nearly erupted into a fistfight before the Texans yielded and allowed Kennedy's body to be transported on Air Force One. At 2:38 p.m. in the afternoon, with Jackie Kennedy at his side, Johnson was administered the oath of office by federal judge Sarah Hughes aboard Air Force One, shortly before departing to Washington with Kennedy's coffin. Already put into a coffin 2 hours after the death. Now, one of the things I find intriguing right there, federal judge was a female in 1963.
Impressive.
And swore the president, number 36, into office. Now, I bet you could ask that question to 100 people. And I bet 90 to 95 of them would not know that the judge was a female. Hey, now we were in the middle of civil rights. So maybe, who knows how the judge got there? Maybe that was her jurisdiction. Who knows? But I find it ironic that Kennedy's, ran on civil rights and getting that type of stuff going. And we have a female who swears in LBJ into the presidency's office. President Kennedy's autopsy was performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., on the night of November the 22nd. Jacqueline Kennedy had selected a naval hospital as the site of President Kennedy because he had been a naval officer, a very good one in World War II. Got some Medal of Honors, I think, some kind of major stuff. The autopsy was conducted by two physicians, naval commanders James Humms and Thornton Boswell. Humms led the procedure under the pressure of the Kennedy family and the White House staffers to expedite the procedure. The physicians conducted a rushed and incomplete autopsy. Kennedy's personal physician, then Rear Admiral George Buckley, signed a death certificate on November the 23rd and recorded the cause of death as a shotgun wound to the skull. I did not know what I'm fixing to tell you as well. 3 years after the autopsy, Kennedy's brain, which had been removed and preserved for later analysis at the okay from the First Lady, was found to be missing from the National Archives. Conspiracy theorists often suggest that the president's brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, destroyed the brain to hide the extent of the president's chronic illnesses and other things that were going on at that time. Some autopsy x-rays and photographs have also been lost. Now, the most powerful person in the world in 1963, his organs come up missing 3 years later. How is that even possible? But it did, I guess, in 1966. You know, it's like the other stuff that's going on. If you remember the Dallas police officer, it might even been a sheriff, I can't remember his name, he's got on the big cowboy hat, walking through the basement of the Dallas, it had to be Dallas Police Department, holding up the rifle that supposedly killed Kennedy. No gloves on. Fingerprints everywhere, holding up the rifle. Now, when things like this happen, you never even see the guns.
No.
He's got the rifle out there in midstream, holding it up for all the reporters to take a picture. You know, they're touching it and turning it. Unbelievable from where we were then to where we are now. Right. Now, you know, we could go on and we could get into the Jack Ruby part and him killing Oswald and remember Jack Ruby, considered Dallas Mafia. Okay. Mm-hmm. So why does Jack Ruby kill Lee Harvey Oswald? Because Lee Harvey Oswald was part of the assassination led by somebody in the U.S. Mafia. Mafia was involved, Jason. I'm telling you right here and right now. And they can take that to the bank. You know, you find out everything when you get to heaven. The JFK assassination is one of the things at the top of my list. I will definitely want to know very quickly where all that took place, for sure. But nevertheless, those events and I have also done a lot of research on the mafia and organized crime, et cetera, going all the way back many years of when I first became familiar with the Godfather movie, and I know we have talked about having an episode on that as well. But nevertheless, today on Money, Motivation, and Mike, that is my thought process behind who killed the 35th president of the United States of America. You can contact us anytime. info@mx3.vip, of course, which I mentioned at the start of the show, which DaxPal has. And you can find our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcast. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, icon bell to get notified of all of our content, which comes out every Monday morning. As we come up on the 60th anniversary of the assassination of the President of the United States of America, and what I also call the 60th anniversary of the government cover-up, it'd be a great time to celebrate his life and the things that he did get going in the 1960s and the change that took place and a lot of the change that took place that we are now getting to live with, fortunately and blessed with the things that he started back in that time. So for everyone who's been a part of Motivation, Money, and Mike, in this episode, continue to live your life the right way.